right, welcome to Body Smart Book Club, where we share the best of what we read. So this week we're still on training for the uphill athlete and diving back in kind of the middle of chapter 5. Last time we talked really a lot about the aerobic base building period. And we touched on a little bit of high intensity last time. And as we were reviewing this chapter and talking about the things, we decided that instead of kind of what we said last time, that we were going to really dive into each of these workouts specifically, we decided that really wasn't the right treatment for this source material. Again, we want to encourage you to dive into this chapter yourself, read this section, and then read it again. There's a lot contained within this chapter, and it's really kind of beyond the format of I think this vodcast to really do it service in a way that's going to be simple, easy, and easy to understand. That being said, we'll still kind of give a broad overview, kind of an eagle's eye view of what we're going to be doing and why. And so let's dive right in. First section is talking about aerobic intervals. So last time we talked about that aerobic base building. That really is more zones 1 or 2. With aerobic intervals, we're still training the aerobic system, but we're also getting into increasing levels of intensity. So more like zones 3 or 4. And while in that, again, with that aerobic base building period, we were really looking at energy systems and how are we utilizing that, right? How do we train our body to utilize fat as a better fuel source? And there definitely is still that component in this training, but it also combines more of that muscular endurance component as well, which is definitely a quality that we need to build when we're doing that training and something we need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we're focused on these aerobic intervals that are essentially going to be a higher intensity level, we're talking, like you said, zone 3 and zone 4, there's got to be something that gives. You can't continue to have an aerobic workout that's based on, having a long duration endurance based on working with oxygen as opposed to anaerobic, which is without oxygen. And so there's kind of 3 different variables you can change within your workouts to make that happen. One is your interval duration, 2, your rest in between, and then 3, the pace. And so when we're talking about these aerobic intervals, obviously our pace is going to be up. We want these to be super intense. And so to be able to still consider this an aerobic workout, the duration of the workout has to be extended. And so in this case, doing aerobic intervals would be, okay, you're going to have intense intervals, we're going to have a longer rest in between, and we're going to have lots of intervals as opposed to having, a shorter rest and just being able to do like 3 or 4 of them. And so that's really the premise behind these aerobic intervals, increasing intensity, and the number of intervals you're doing, but making sure that you have good rest in between each interval.
Definitely. And I think, again, the thing that's really important here is you have to have really, like we've talked about before, multiple measures of intensity, right? For this type of training, really, I think some type of heart rate monitoring is for sure ideal, right? Whether that's a chest strap, that's kind of the gold standard, or a wrist-based heart rate. I can speak words. That gives you an idea, right? And then also kind of bringing in those RPE scales, and then pace at different times can kind of give us an idea of that intensity. Just so we're using multiple metrics to help us get into those zones that we're looking to be in, so that we're actually getting the training effect that's desired.
Yeah. For sure. And the examples that they give in the book, I'm just going to run through these really quick. Again, if you really want to dive into this chapter and learn more about these workouts, the best thing to do is just get the book and read it. But we'll go over these really quick. So the examples were threshold intervals, aerobic power intervals, and 30-30s. So I think the best way to do it is to just get an example of each. Yeah. So an example of a threshold interval would be 3 times 20 minutes in zone 3. So 20 minute, take a break, 20 minute, take a break, 20 minute, take a break. Next one is aerobic power interval. An example of this would be just 15 to 30 minutes in zone 4. The next one is 30-30s. So this one is basically you're running hard for 30 seconds and then you're running slow for 30 seconds. So you're going to run hard for 30 seconds and hopefully get to about zone 4, 15 seconds in. And then once that 30 seconds is up, you're going to slow down so your heart rate goes back about 5 to 7 beats for 30 seconds, and then you're going to pick that up and you're going to do that 30 on 30 off 2 times 6 minutes. So there's an example of that, and then you eventually can ramp that up to 2 times 8 minutes, 2 times 10 minutes, and eventually get up to being able to do that for 20 minutes at a time.
Definitely. But noticing that difference kind of between the novice level and more elite, right? Just being able to spend longer periods of times in there.
Yeah. And an untrained athlete, definitely that 5 to 7 beats, that's not going to be very much of a change there.
No.
And so that's why, starting closer to that 6 minutes for a set is going to be more applicable for the everyday athlete as opposed to that 20 minutes that, elite world-class athletes may be able to do.
Exactly.
For sure. A couple things I think to pay attention to. Again, this is one of the reasons that we want to use multiple measures of intensity is because that's such a narrow heart rate range. And we're adding in the concept of cardiac lag that we've discussed before, right? So you run really hard. It takes a little bit for your heart rate to kind of match that intensity that you're running at. And then as you slow back down, again, there's that lag. And so being able to have a couple different measures of intensity can help with making sure you're staying in the right zones. Another thing you might have noticed in those workouts is some of the difference in times, right? So we had the zone 3 workout that was closer to an hour, more like 40 to 60 minutes versus that zone 4 going more to the 15 to 30 minute range. And so that's one of the things that we have to be aware of is that we're putting an increased demand on our bodies. And so we're not going to be able to spend as long in zone 4 as we might spend in zone 3, right? Our body needs that time to recover. Kind of goes back to the principle that we talked about, that we've talked about in past episodes of, as you increase your level of fitness, your recovery runs are going to have to drop down into more zone 1 runs because your zone 2 will have raised its ceiling and it will be a lot closer to that zone 3. And so again, your body needs more time to recover. So that's either in length of recovery or in duration of workout.
I think a lot of athletes, myself included, try to put these different zones into what that effort would look like as far as like a race day effort. When we're talking zone 4, it's going to be like your 5K race effort for a trained athlete. Whereas when you're talking zone 2 and 3, you're going to be closer to like your marathon, half marathon.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I know, that was awesome. Much easier that way, for sure. So next we have anaerobic intervals. So this one, the design is going to be a little bit different than those aerobic intervals, right? The purpose is different. So wherein the aerobic intervals, we're really interested in training the endurance qualities of that aerobic system and of the muscles. Here we're really looking to train kind of limits of the anaerobic system, right? We're looking at how do we really raise that lactate threshold so that you can run at a higher pace for longer.
Yep. So in these intervals, your primary fuel source is going to be your ATP. And with these, you're going to be more or less hitting your max effort for every single interval, or at least building up to that. When you're just starting out, you may not be able to hit that for whatever reason, but as you get going, a few of these workouts into your training block, you're going to be able to be hitting that 100% all-out effort. An important factor with these is that, one, they're going to be really short. For one, your ATP only lasts for about 10 to 15 seconds as far as how much your body can store at one time. The good news is that replenishes very rapidly at complete rest. And so with the rest in these workouts, it's going to come down to really taking as much rest as you need to be able to get completely recovered so that you can hit that max effort every single time. If you're limiting yourself and you're, hitting 90% and the diminishing returns down to 85 and 80, this workout essentially isn't hitting its purpose. Its purpose is to hit your max effort every single interval. And these workouts aren't long. They're pretty short. And so don't think you're going to have to doing, 40 by 100 meters or anything like that. Even these might just be like 8 to 10 sprints and complete rest in between.
Yeah.
And just side note, when you're doing these kind of workouts, make sure that you're doing a good warm up and a good cool down afterwards.
Definitely, yeah. Right. The risk, just because we're going at a much higher intensity and really maximally stressing that, the injury risk is just greater. And so, really, really paying attention to that and making sure that your body is ready. And ready before you're in, right? I think there's all days, like we talked about, that your body's telling you, don't do this. Today is not today, right? Just like that. Not today. I don't remember what videos that's from, but that is my body.
Everyone's body has a British accent.
Whatever that.
Whatever nationality that accent was from.
But
maybe you say it in hillbilly accent.
Yes.
I mean.
Yeah.
Your spirit animal.
Your spirit animal, for sure. It's going to be terribly wonderful, right? Like it's
the perfect way to put it.
Yeah. And it can be really fun, and it's neat to like be able to push yourself and like see, can I get to max speed? But like you said, those times are going to be different for everyone. We're really working on those highly fatigable, fast twitch fibers that can create a lot of power, but definitely need that time to recover. So this is not going to be making up a huge component of workouts, right? We're just high intensity in general. We're talking about 20% of your runs, right? That low intensity more 80%, high intensity 20%. This is just part of that 20%. So, and not really the maximal part of that. So,
for sure. And something that they talk about in the book underneath anaerobic intervals is heel bounding. And this is new to me. I didn't know that this was the kind of workout and that it would be beneficial. So I really enjoyed reading about this. So hill bounding is basically sprinting up or down a hill, but instead of just normal running, you're bounding. So you're trying to get like good air time. And
yes,
that's awesome. And it makes sense that would be beneficial. It's kind of the same effect that you get with like your bouncy plyometric kind of drills, right? And I love this. I actually tried this on a run this week. I was like, I'm gonna hill bound down this hill, and it was so fun because I was like jumping off rocks and like getting air, and I felt so cool.
It does feel, I call it mountain goating.
That's a good way to put it.
So funny story. I was with some family one time, and we had just hiked up Ben Lomond, and we thought it'd be really cool to like, to bound down, and we're like, oh, we'll do it like a Solomon commercial, right? Like look all intense and everything. So there was like 5 or 6 of us, I don't remember the exact number, and so do it right in succession. We can't come running down again. I feel so cool, right? Like jumping off rocks and just like taking corners really fast. And we all felt like super boss, right? Like, yeah, look at that, we're gonna look so cool, and that's on video. And the person taking the video had taken one photo instead of a video, so that was not preserved for posterity.
Didn't really catch the energy there as way as you wanted.
Although I'm sure it would have looked way less intense. It was a good time. I'm sure like if we had the video, it would have looked way less intense than we felt.
Oh, that's always how it works. I don't know about you guys, but this is always what I picture in my head when I jump off a rock and I get air. I always think like, and I like imagine slow motion. And it's like,
yes. We need to. We should put this in the in the comments, or put a link to this. There's I think it's a Levi's commercial with Jake Johnson, and it's like just look up like Jake Johnson parkour Levi's or something like that. But it's like it's hilarious. I'm making myself laugh with it. It's him like running and doing like all the parkour stuff off trees and benches and fences and stuff like that, like what it looks like in his mind versus reality, and he's just like barely crawling over things. Anyway, definitely check it out.
That Office episode of parkour.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Parkour, right? Yeah, yes, yeah. So check that out as an aside. But no, I think it's definitely a useful type of workout. And again, it's a different stimulus, right? It's going to work our body in different ways. Right, we're used to kind of that higher cadence, shorter step length in most of our runs. And so just changing it up a little bit biomechanically can be really good because it stresses our body in different ways than it's used to.
And that reminds me of this quote that was in the book that I wrote down. It just said, there's not one workout or one intensity that can optimally achieve what the combined effect of several different intensity doses and durations can achieve. So basically, it's important to just mix up your workouts, do a whole bunch of different things.
Definitely.
And I think that's why it gives us so many examples in the book here. This chapter really is just so dense, like we've hit on several times. And with that, there is so many different options here and so many different variations you can do. And being able to train all of them that way is super important. And specifically with these anaerobic, hill bounding, strides, sprints, things like that, your running economy is going to be something that's going to be really a big proponent of improvement from these workouts. You're going to be able to handle faster speeds using the same amount of energy you had used previously at a slower speed. And so that's really our goal with these anaerobic intervals, is to be able to improve that so that we can be running at the pace that we were running at 75% effort at a faster pace.
Definitely, which is a super important part of our training.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing with the intervals that I think we should mention is that with those, we can accomplish a greater workload over time, right? Versus I'm going to run at this level of intensity for this long period of time, right? That's really going to exhaust us, wear us out. We might not be able to accomplish as much as we might with shorter intervals, but more of those intervals spaced into the workout.
Mm-hmm.
And so just another way to get that volume in without taxing our bodies so much at one given time. I think one last point to touch on is they brought up the concept of anaerobic endurance, which they mentioned is kind of like a misnomer, right? Like anaerobic and endurance don't really go together, but it's just kind of trying to squeeze the last little bit of juice out of that around an anaerobic system when it comes to race day. These workouts are few and far between, and honestly, for most athletes, I wouldn't recommend them, just because of the risk for injury and how much it stresses the body system. It's like the anaerobic intervals that we talked about, but cranked up to 11, right? Like, let's take those and put them on steroids. So versus that, like 8 to 12 seconds that you're running, there's like 20 to 30 minutes maximal intensity, and then having the shorter rest periods, and then let's do it again, and then again, and then again, and again. I think Killian said he does like a set of 10, has a longer rest period, and then another set of 10. So that's like...
And he only does that 2 or 3 times every training cycle.
Mm-hmm. So just another example of how crazy Killian is. Again, really, it's going to be a very, very tiny component of your overall season training plan. And honestly, for most people, probably not going to be a component at all.
Yeah, I'd say for most people, racing kind of replaces that. People are racing, that kind of hits that same base where Killian's more or less peaking for a race or two a year that, is a race that he needs some kind of a supplement to replace, where the everyday runner that races, every other weekend or that much to kind of get that replacement for those anaerobic endurance intervals.
I personally really like this kind of workout. I think obviously you have to build up to it. If you're a beginner runner, you can't just jump right into a workout like this. But I think if anything, it's great for mental toughness, and it is good practice for when you need to tap into that mental toughness for a race. So I think it's a great idea to do a few of these workouts every year. Just make sure that you're smart about it and make sure that you build up to it.
Yeah. Well, I think just speaking again to that mental toughness component, you will for dang sure get some of that with these type of workouts.
Yeah.
But really, I think, again, the same idea that you talked about with that quote, right? That there's not just one workout that can give us what we need, right? We need a variety of intensities. We need a variety of workouts. And I think in that same vein, we need exposure to different type of environment to build mental toughness, because one type of training isn't going to do it alone. I think bringing in all these different things that are going to challenge us physically and that are going to challenge us mentally in different ways is really going to go a long way to build that mental resilience, so that even though come race day, we can always plan, but the unexpected can always arise. But building up our capacity, building up that reserve allows us to be prepared to navigate whatever comes up with success. So last, I think we'll just go briefly over the athlete stories. In this section, there were 2 of them that we covered. They're always fun to read just because they have some really neat takeaways. It's super fun to get into the science and the how and the why of training, but being able to have the lived experience, I think, adds another component that can be really beneficial. And there's so many different perspectives that come from these runners, right? Different types of training, different goals. And I think that really always something we can benefit from as runners and probably as humans as well. So do you want to talk about the first one with Luke Nelson?
Yeah.
That is his name.
Yes, and he has a very nice smile. One of the things that stood out to me in this story is when Luke Nelson, he was trying to decide if he wanted to keep racing or if he wanted to do his own kind of mountaineering projects. And it was hard for him to make this decision because He's sponsored, and that's kind of how his sponsorships are. That's what his sponsorships are based off of, is his races. And his coach just finally said you need to choose one or the other because it's just too much to do well. And I thought that was just a good little lesson of, where are your priorities? What do you want to do? Do you want to be, kind of good at a whole bunch of little things, or do you want to focus all your attention on one thing and get really good at that? And he eventually did decide to focus more on his mountaineering, climbing, doing his own things, and he became very, very successful, and has been very successful in his endeavors, and because he put all of his focus in one thing. So I liked that a lot.
Yeah. I think one of the other cool things was, I really loved his attitude. So the story talked about how he and his friend did the 14ers in Colorado, and about the experience. And they were trying to kind of beat the previous record, and then wound up coming in second place to that. But for him, it was so much more about the experience and the time and the beauty than it was about not necessarily reaching that aim to be the best, right? And so I think that's a good lesson to internalize, right? That yes, it's really cool to break records, and there's a lot of pride and feeling of accomplishment that comes with that. But there's also a lot of pride and accomplishment that comes with doing a feat like that, right? Like that is no small feat. And just recognizing that it wasn't all about the time, and kind of putting his ego in check and being like, I did this for me, and I learned these things. And, I think that's really cool, just to be able to step outside of himself and enjoy the experience for what it was and not for what it lacked.
Yeah, it definitely became more like a part of who he was. It says, before he'd done the 14ers in Colorado, he'd also done all the 13s in Utah and all the 12s in Idaho. So it kind of become his thing to, try and do these multiple tallest peaks in the area all at the same time, which is pretty amazing.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So next one, Mike Foote, who set the, oh my gosh, insane, right? Insane.
Yeah.
So set the uphill vertical for 24 hours, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So really crazy, right? Set the record for vertical uphill skiing in 24 hours, and it was by about 1,000 feet, I think, that he broke the previous record. Is it something like that?
I can't remember what the exact numbers were. He hit about 62,000 feet, right?
So this story, right? Mike Foote, crazy, set the world record for uphill skiing in 24 hours, which skiing for 24 hours sounds insane. Of course, you've run through a full 24 hours,
I've never
right?
skied for that
That's
long.
true. I've never seen that. But an incredible feat in itself. But then he beat the previous record by about 1,000 feet, right?
And look at
Give a
this.
little
They calculated this to be around 2,800 to 3,000 feet per hour. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's
Holy
a lot of
moly.
climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, one of those things that just takes a lot of mental toughness. He mentioned in there about kind of hitting that trough as he was going through, and he'd been going really good, had been, I think, about 3,000 feet ahead of the record, and then just everything kind of shut down, right? Just really dipped into that trough, but able to come back out of that and kind of conquer that experience. And
I thought his training was really interesting too. It talks about that a little bit here on the first page, with how much he was climbing every week leading up to that. He was doing between 40 and 50,000 feet for his 3 biggest weeks, which is a ton. That's a lot
Just
of
curious,
climbing consistently.
Before we did this, you were talking about your new climbing goal. What are your climbing goals right now?
So I'm getting ready for an event, the Cirque Series, where they were canceled because of COVID and not being able to have mass participation events. They're doing a Max Vert challenge in October. And it's like there's a team aspect to it, so you can win it as both like an individual competition and a team one. And so I've teamed up with another one of my fellow Solomon athletes, and we're going to see how much we can climb in the month of October. And so I was hoping to get right around 130, 150,000 feet for the month of October.
Whatever.
So that'll be a lot of
That's
climbing
awesome.
on their feet. But,
Yeah, what is that? What is that per
pretty
day?
excited about
I don't
it.
feel like doing the math.
48 to 5,000 a day.
Yeah.
Whew.
That's awesome.
That's intense, but
Yeah.
super awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun.
Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've never
That'll
like
be
ever
fun.
tried to tackle anything like this before. It's always been, run this many miles and lift this much weight.
Yeah.
And so doing vert is going to be something different, and I think ultimately help me. That's always kind of been my more or less my weakness in my mountain running, trail running resume, and so I think that will help kickstart that and maybe make it a strength for me instead.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you'll have to keep us updated on how your training's going and what you're learning through that.
Yep, definitely
Seriously.
will.
One last thing in here that I just thought was really cool, and we probably don't think about in terms of considering elite athletes, is he talked about how he had a whole team there to help him accomplish that goal. And that, I think, is crucial, right? We see when any world-class athlete, right, Killian, Iliud, just any of those really accomplished athletes, we forget about their support team, right? Like, they're so amazing they did this, and it is, right? Like physically amazing feats that they're accomplishing, but without that support team, it wouldn't have happened, right? And so recognizing how important that can be. And I mean, I just think about your 100-mile marathon, right? Like, you got family and friends and people to kind of be there and support you, and it seems like that made a lot of difference for you versus not having something like that in place.
For sure. We actually went and got medals for our parents and family members
Cool.
who helped us, because we're like, you earn medals too. Like, this was everyone's race. It wasn't just our race. So, and I think even if all of your friends and family and the people who support you aren't at your race, like, they still are a part of you and a part of your training. And I feel like it kind of is everybody's race, because they do have a really big impact on you and your training.
Yeah. If you guys haven't had a chance to listen to her story doing the 100-miler, we have a bonus podcast. It's up. Super cool to hear her account of running 100 miles with her husband. Definitely a lot went into that, both training and logistically, and some good experiences on race day as well.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that really wraps it up for the day. But definitely we'd encourage you to dive into this chapter. It is filled with like so many nuggets of goodness. It's a new phrase. It's totally going to catch on. But I think it takes a careful reading to really capture the deeper aspects of this chapter and how to apply that to training in a focused way that makes it of the most benefit for long-term performance.
For sure. Also, I feel like this chapter, it was pretty advanced. If you're a beginner runner and you want to learn more about workouts, I actually would recommend reading 80-20 by Matt Fitzgerald. I know that we've talked about that a few times, but he goes into different kinds of workouts. He talks about low intensity, moderate intensity, high intensity, and I feel like he breaks it up in a more clear and more like beginner type way.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that. And again, if you have any questions on what you read this week, or if you have any questions on this episode or previous episodes, go ahead and comment through our Facebook page, Body Smart PT, or you can send us a message through our website, bodysmartutah.com.
Yeah.
Okay, and then sponsors.
Yeah.
Okay, so quick shout out.
Better brace myself for this.
Quick shout out to our sponsors. Shout out to the Oka to Stansbury Trail Series. Shout out to the Utah Running Shop. And shout out to the Wasatch
Run Club!
Yeah! Wasatch Run Club. Check it out on Facebook or our website, wasatchrunclub.com. Lots of great resources. We post all these videos on there as well. It's my group. We run every Wednesday. We should try to. We miss here and there. But also, I think we should mention that this is officially a podcast now, too.
Yeah.
We're on all the podcast platforms. And so if you've been watching recently, you can now listen as well on your favorite podcast streaming service.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. Interval bathing.